Hi. As we look at Google Sheets today, we are going to look at some more very popular functions besides some. We'll include some, but then 4 others that you may want to use from time to time. And then we'll also look at buttons that are equivalent to Excel's fill and clear buttons. In Sheets, we have some very different kinds of options, so I think it's worth our time to explore those possibilities. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's dive right in to learning more about functions in Google Sheets. Our example today is a series that was played by 2 hockey teams, and this would have been some sort of a playoff series. And you can kind of tell, even just by looking at the 5 games, that Team A just had real difficulties and that Team B really came to win. But let's say that we want to get some statistics from these 5 games that they played. And of course, one of the easiest ones, and maybe the most likely ones, would be something like, well, what is the total number of points that each team got throughout the 5 games? And so to do that, we would certainly look here at C10, where we're going to put our formula, and then we'll go to the far right of that toolbar where we have the functions button that looks like a Greek sigma or maybe just a fancy E, and we'll click the drop down, and the very first choice here is sum. So we'll click sum. And when we do, it starts the function for us, the formula. So it starts with an equal sign, and then it has sum, meaning that we're going to add things together. And then we simply have to say what we want to add. Now, we could type C4 colon C8, meaning start at C4, but include C8, and then the colon just means everything in between as well. Or we can also click and drag over C4 through C8, which when the formula and the cells are fairly close together, I kind of like that method. You'll notice that it is even somewhat color-coded, but there is our formula, so we'll press enter, and it tells us that Team A received 8 points total for 5 games. Now, instead of using the fill handle, which of course we could do, and to copy that formula, let's just get in some extra practice. So I'm going to come over to D10 and come back to our functions button, click the drop down, select sum again, and this time we know that we can click and drag over D4 through D8, press enter, and wow, so Team B, over a course of 5 games, scored more than twice the points that Team A did. So no wonder Team B wound up the champion of this particular playoff series. Wow. All right, now another thing that I think people look for in game statistics is, what is the average number of points per game? Well, let's look at that. So we'll come down to C11 and find out Team A's average first, but we'll come back up to the sum button, the functions button, and the second choice here in the list is average. Now, if you think about average and how you would do that manually, first you would add up all of the points for the 5 games, which, well, we kind of did with sum and total already. But then you would divide that by the number of games that you've added together. So it's a 2-step process. The nice thing about having average here as part of the functions is that you don't have to memorize that rule. You don't have to do 2 separate steps. You simply click on average, and it says, okay, so what do you want to average? Well, I'm going to again click on C4 through C8, make sure that's what I've got, press enter, and it says that, well, 1.6, so about 1.5 points per game. That easy. So let's then come over to Team B and let's do the same thing. Let's figure out the average number of points per game. So we'll come over to the functions button, click the drop down, select average, And again, it's going to ask us what we want to average, and I'll click and drag over D4 through D8 and press enter. And oh boy, almost 3.5 points per game. So again, we can see that that's just about twice as many points and on average per game than what Team A did. So we can tell very easily why Team B won, but it's interesting how we can get those statistics so easily. Now, our next choice here is count, is the actual function, but we want to count the numbers, and it only counts the numbers. So it will not count, for example, any text or blank cells. So in fact, let's kind of test that theory a little bit. So when I go up to the Functions button and click the drop down, we'll select Count. And this time, I think I'm going to type in, let's see, C2 through C8. So I've added, and you can kind of see by that little, I guess it's orange, border around where I've typed, or the range that I've suggested. You can see that it goes clear around C2, a blank cell, and C3, which has text in it. So let's see what kind of a count we get, because that would be 1, 2, 7 cells. Press enter, and it says no, there are only 5 cells that have numbers. Well, let's do that again as extra practice here. So in D12, I'm going to again go to the Functions button, click the drop down, go to Count, and again I think I'll just type it in. So it's going to be D2 colon D8, and again I can see that boundary around that range that I've selected. Press enter, and again 5 games. Well, that's a good thing. We know that this works really well, and that both of the teams played amazingly 5 games. Well, let's come down to max then, because max helps us determine the largest number within a range. Now with 5 games, it's really not that big of a deal. We can just look at the scores and figure it out. But if you have, say 100 numbers that you want to find, or 1,000 numbers, and you want to find the largest number within that range, it would be so easy to scroll and just miss that largest number. Or maybe you could even misread it, which sometimes, depending on fonts, that would be a possibility as well. So to actually have a formula that helps you find the largest number within a range of cells can be an extremely helpful choice. Well, let's go to our function button here, click the drop down, and select max for maximum largest number. And again, I think I'm just going to go back to my clicking and dragging method here. So I'll click and drag over C4 through C8, press enter, and it tells me that 3 is the highest score that Team A had. And it had it twice, but it's not going to, in the formula, put 3 in twice. So we just know 3 is the largest number. Well, let's come over to Team B and D13. And we'll practice that again. So we'll go to our Functions button, and we'll select Max, and I'm going to click and drag over D4 through D8, press enter, and wow, the largest number there was 6. So when the largest number of points is twice what one team had over another, then you can see why Team B was truly the winner of this series. Well, let's go to our one last example, and this is min. So it's the minimum amount, the smallest number within a range. And again, if you have a large number of cells that you're trying to scroll through to figure out, is this the smallest number? And somehow I can even sort of see myself with a pencil and paper writing down the small number and scrolling down. Oh, no, that's not the small number. This one is. It would be really easy to just miss the smallest number as you scroll through a large amount of cells. So we will go to our function button and come down to min. and I'm going to click and drag over A4 through A8, not A, C4 through C8, press enter, and the lowest score was, wow, they didn't score any points. And then we'll come over to Team B, which is column D, and we'll click Min one more time. This time I'm going to click and drag over D4 through D8 and press enter. Well, it was just one. Well, sadly for Team A, when they had their lowest number of points, so did Team B, but still, Team B got one more than Team A. So no matter how you slice this, Team B was the far superior team, but we have developed statistics for both teams so that we can even numerically prove why Team B was the superior team. I've now moved over to a new sheet where we can discuss how you can copy what is in one cell and fill other cells with that same information. So in A1, I'm going to type a 15. And then before I actually try to do this copy, there's one thing that I need to check. And that is if I go up to the menu bar and go to Tools and click on that, then a little more than halfway down that drop-down menu, I want to be sure that Enable Autocomplete does have a check mark. If it doesn't, you would want to click on it to get the check mark, but mine does. So now let's go back to A1, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key to select A9, and then all of the cells in between are also selected. Now to copy what is in A1 down a column, I simply press Control and Enter at the same time and let them up, and that 15 is copied. Now I can also copy across a row, so I'm going to select A1, hold down my Shift key and click E1, so I'm going across row 1, and again I can press Control Enter. Now, besides using Control Enter to fill in a range of cells, I can also use Control D for down and Control R for right. So here I am at E1. Let's just click on it again, and I'm going to select E9 as I hold down the Shift key. So I've selected a range of cells, and I'm going to press Control D to copy down. And I could also then, let's come over to E5 and go to H5, but again, I'm just going to hold down my Shift key here to select that particular range of cells, and I'm going to use Control R this time to fill to the right. Now you would think that if I can use Control D and Control R, that I could also use Control L for left or Control U for up, but those do not work. The only two key combinations that work is Control D for down and Control R for right. Well, let's go to A7 here. And what I can do to select a range is that I can use Control, Shift, and right arrow. Now that's going to take me from the cell that I've selected to the next populated cell. So again, Control, Shift, right arrow on my keyboard takes me from A7 all the way over to E7, and it selects all of the cells in between, and then I could use Control Enter to copy that as well. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm going to come down to E9, and I'm going to change that 15 to a 20. Because it seems to me that if I can copy to the right, I should be able to copy to the left. So let's do this. Let's do a Control, Shift, left arrow. And yes, it went from E9 to A9, selected all the cells in between. And notice again that I have a 15 in A9 and I have a 20 in E9. This is where it may surprise you. When I press Control Enter, it copies the 15 and overwrites the 20. So even though I've selected from right to left, it only copies from left to right. Well, let's do some other things here and see what we can do. Let's go to D1. And then from D1, I'm going to change it to a 20. And then I'm going to do a Control Shift down. So first of all, let me press Enter, come back to the 20. Then I'll do a Control Shift and a down arrow, because all of these arrow keys should work some way or another. And when I press Enter, now keep in mind I've got a 20 here in row 1 and a 15 here in row 7. But when I use that Control Shift key combination, it went to the next populated cell. Well, let's do Control Enter, and it copies the 20 down and overwrites the 15 that was there. And that kind of makes sense. But then let's also go to C7, and I'm going to change it to a 30 just for a different number here. And this time I'm going to use Control Shift up arrow. So again, I'm going from bottom to the top, and when I press Control Enter, it just does a copy down and it overwrites that 30. So while we can use any of the directional arrows to select, the result is kind of surprising when you try to copy up or to the left. Really, it only fills down into the right. Now, here's another kind of interesting way to copy. Let me type in A12 here. Let me type a number. And then I'm going to go back to that cell and do Control C to copy it. Now here's where it may be very surprising, but I'm going to then go to the address bar, the address box, which is just to the left of your formula bar. Now right now it says A12, so it tells you where you are. The name box is really the official name here. And I can type a range of cells or even just a cell name. So let's go with J1 colon J15, and I'll even press Enter, and it sets that address in. Now notice that on the right I have selected all of these cells in column J. Now I simply press Control V to paste, and it pastes that 40 that was in A12 into all of those cells, J1 through J15. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Now the other button that is in Excel that is in its editing group is Clear. And Sheets really doesn't have the same ability. So with Sheets, what we can do is, I have this range selected, so let me come up to, let's see, make the numbers bold and maybe italicized. Then I could go up to the menu bar to Format, and down at the very bottom of that drop down I can clear the formatting. If I want to actually remove the information that's in the cells, I select those cells and press the delete key to clear out those cells. To learn even more, visit our mymcpl.org/online learning page, where you will find some really great online resources, which include Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, and Learning Express Library. Tune in each week as we introduce new videos on a variety of tech topics. You can find us at 1 o'clock on Wednesday and Friday and 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Be sure to find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, or if you prefer, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at MCPLMO, where you can find our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist.